Good evening, friends. The Indigenous Concerns Subcommittee of the Pacific Yearly Meeting Ministry Committee thanks you for joining us in this ethical land transition webinar. You are tuning in from many places on Turtle Island. We are delighted that you are interested in the ideas and possibilities that will be shared now. So back now to our moderator, Barbara Babin of Redwood Forest Meeting.
Well, hello everyone. It just gives us such great pleasure to see you all and to welcome you here tonight. I'm just going to mention who is on our team this evening, and you will see us all individually on camera as we go through the evening. Sophie Brinker is our tech support person, and she's going to be giving us our housekeeping details in a few minutes. And we have our speakers, Cassandra Ferreira, who is Director of the Center for Ethical Land Transition, and Frank Lawrence, who is a pro bono attorney for CHIRP, which stands for California Heritage Indigenous Research Program. And then we thank Leslie for the introduction. And coming up at the end, we're going to have a surprise late breaking message from Santa Cruz meeting. And Nancy and Hans will be bringing us that. So I'll turn it over to Sophie for our housekeeping message.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this important conversation. I'll be supporting with Zoom Tech for the webinar and wanted to share a few details before we get started. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask the speakers, please message them to Barbara in the chat section. And if you have any technical questions or any issues that come up throughout the call, I'm happy to support you. And you can do that by selecting, you can chat me and do that by selecting our names in the to field down in the chat section. So if you look on the bottom right of your screen and you click that little blue bubble, you can choose either me or Barbara. And we're also recording this conversation for people who can't make it this evening. And that's all for now. And we're just really grateful to be here, and thanks everyone for being here tonight.
Well, thank you, Sophie. I just want to lay out a little bit about the flow of the evening, how we're going to proceed. I will provide some comments just to give us a little context for what we're talking about tonight, and then introduce our speakers. They will each talk with you and explain a little bit about their relationship to land transitions and their experiences. Then they will speak together for a few minutes, and then we'll have some time for question and answers. And we have some closing things that we'd like to share. So as Leslie pointed out, this webinar is being brought to you by the Indigenous Concerns Subcommittee of the Ministry Committee of Pacific Yearly Meeting. And for those of you who are from elsewhere, Pacific Yearly Meeting is the regional organization of Quakers covering California, Nevada, Mexico, and Hawaii. And for the last 60 years, a 240-acre property outside of Nevada City has been held mostly by a mostly Quaker board. First, it housed a boarding school, then a semester program, and along the way there were summer youth camps, and they've been operating a retreat center, doing some outdoor education programs. When the Woolman Board announced their intention to close their programs and sell this property to the Nevada City Rancheria of the Nisenan tribe, our committee thought that an educational session on land transitions might be helpful to our Quaker community so that we could place this Woolman to CHIRP land transition within a broader context. And I want to recognize that it's both these land transitions can be both joyous and sad at the same time. When we have to let go of something that we've enjoyed and held close to our hearts for 60 plus years, it's hard to let it go. And we recognize that as much as we think this is the right thing, it is definitely turning a page. I want to just mention why Quakers and other people of faith or people of conscience care so much about seeing that land gets back into the hands of the people whose homelands were taken from them. I'm sure I don't need to tell you about the brutal history of colonization, and the settlement of this continent, the stealing of land, the broken treaties, enslavement of people, genocide, forced relocation, forced assimilation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Quakers have been right in the middle of the colonizer history and have made some serious mistakes. But our legacy as a faith community is also that when we see systems of injustice and oppression, we believe it's our spirit-led work to work toward balance and equity, to work toward justice and repair, and we strive to make things right. And one way we can address these specific wrongs and help bring about repair is to support land return. And why land? Why land? Well, for most Indigenous groups, being on the land and stewarding it is deeply spiritual work. It's a spiritual life. There's the deep connection to and relationship with the plants, animals, waterways, and the land itself. Land isn't something you own, but something you care for, and then which cares for you in return. This is the reciprocity that Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about in Braiding Sweetgrass. And it's important not only that Indigenous groups be able to access the land for ceremony and cultural practices, but that they also have agency and control over what happens on the land and how the land is stewarded and used. So we're going to share different experiences, and you'll be getting at the end of the evening a link to a resource sheet that shows there's not just one way to go about this. There's not one right way. The list that we have is not an exhaustive list, but it might be helpful to you as individuals, organizations, Quaker meetings, as you think about how you want to engage with land justice. And I think we're also going to hear from our presenters, and you'll find when you look into these resources that the path isn't always easy. It's not just, oh, I think I'd like to return my land to my local Indigenous group, and then it's just like I can find a real estate agent to make it happen. It's not necessarily as easy as that. And we're very grateful that there are groups like the Center for Ethical Land Transition that can help ease that path. So I will like to introduce our presenters and give them the next 45 minutes or so to share their own stories and their experiences with land justice and their work to support this particular transition as well from Woolman to Chirp. And as we go along, as Sophie mentioned, if you have questions for our presenters, please send them to me in the chat and I will collect them and share them at the question and answer time. So Cassandra Ferreira has background as a real estate agent. She became a real estate agent in 2003 and committed early on to finding ways to decommodify and deprivatize land. She has listened her way forward, guided by the generosity of spirit mentors and friends who would help her co-found the Center for Ethical Land Transition. She has a great deal of cultural sensitivity, and that is something that is really helpful when you want to make sure that your land transition is equitable and ethical. And she'll share with us more about that, what that means. What does that mean to have an ethical land transition? And then Frank Lawrence has represented Indian tribes for over 30 years, including serving as the pro bono legal counsel to the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe for the past 4 years. And I'll let him tell a little bit more about himself and his background with federal Indian law and federally recognized tribes. And he'll be telling us a little bit about what is difficult for tribes that don't have federal recognition. And so with that, I think I'd like to invite Sandra to come up, Cassandra, and we'll put her on the speaker view.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Barbara, for inviting me into this space. It's very heartening for me to join in with faith-based communities in the work that you all are doing. It's brave work, it's big work, it's timely. And I really believe that faith-based communities have so much to offer. And my experience is that you all are doing a lot to lead the way. And because healing, the work that we need to do in healing with land really is best, I believe, guided by a spiritual rudder, because it's big and hard work. So as Barbara said, my name is Cassandra. I am calling in to you from the unceded lands of the Southern Pomo and Coast Miwok people in Sebastopol in Northern California, where I have lived for the last 22 years and really sought and continue to seek. I think will be for the rest of my life, on the journey of coming into right relationship with land and people here and just on the path of discovery of what that means. Like Barbara said, and also please excuse me, I'm recovering from one of those horrible flus going around. So my voice and cough are a little present with me still. So I have been a real estate agent for the last 20 years. And it was a need to have a career to support myself as a single mother, and also a career that would allow me to learn about something that I hold very near and dear, and that is how this precious sacred earth has come to be a commodity that we exchange like like that it's a thing, an object distant from us. And when we all know land is our source of life and home and so much more. So I am going to show you some slides tonight that are going to bring you on into our framework with the Center for Ethical Land Transition. We are a new nonprofit, so we've been around now for about a year and a half, although it was being formed for many years before that. And it's been incredible, timely experience to be able to provide real estate technical services in the fastly growing land justice movement. And so it's been an incredible experience to witness how much the work is needed, because we're doing bridging work right now. We're bridging between systems that exist, that can be so racially oppressive, and we are together, all of us are needed to dismantle those systems for all of our healing and liberation. And so the Center for Ethical Land Transition goes right into the zone, as we say over and over again, land transitions, because so much of land is transitioning. And so so how we show up to that work is what the Center for Ethical Land Transition is about. I'll share my screen now and bring you through some slides. And is it working?
I can't see it yet.
Okay, let me try that again. Uh-oh. Interesting. We just went through this, didn't we? Okay, let me see what might be happening. My apologies. Mm.
I'm going to try removing the spotlight and see if that takes care of it.
Oh, okay, thank you. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, good. We work together. So here we are. The Center for Ethical Land Transition is a program that is sponsored by Commonweal, which has been a huge blessing for us. If any of you know that incredible organization out in Bolinas. So we're entering into a world where land is already divided, privately owned, seen as an asset, commodity, object. Transacted, sold by agents who are paid a commission on a sales commission, and where our ethics are regulated by the State Department of Real Estate and Federal Department of Justice. Now, all of this, as we know, is a worldview. It is an imposed worldview, and it's actually legal fiction. That's how we like to think about it, is that this is our current story that we're embroiled in right now. It's not right. Just because it exists does not make it right. It is a something that has, like I said, been imposed, and it is a dominant, not only narrative, but in some ways, cultural edifice that is locking land up in a pretty dangerous private circumstance that does not allow the collective good to be as considered as it needs to be, certainly in the times of climate chaos that we are living through. In real estate, the basic relationship structure is very objectified. You've got your sellers, your owners, your buyers. It's a sale transaction. There's agents and to buffer the people from each other as they transact property. And I know this is very gross representation, but it's an important thing for us to really look at what it is that we're that we're starting with right now. In the dominant paradigm, real estate's transactional, land is commodity. These practices are rooted in the doctrine of discovery and manifest destiny. Literally, casework, legal casework is rooted in the doctrine of discovery, which we know is now on the path of repudiation and hopefully renouncement. Indigenous, Black, and cultural communities are denied accessibility. We are capitalizing land, which I would suggest is a misplaced capitalization. If you're displaced or poor, that's criminalized. The whole game board sets up for the prioritization of the wealthy highest bidder. And while the land's inventory and natural resources are objectified, this depersonalizes people, and people communicate through agents. And of course, we know this system continues to create and uphold massive wealth and land access inequity. So we all need to slow this process down. This is up to all of us to heal these inequities and false dualities, false separations, and often urgencies that that drive this system to where we just go down the highway of the known. So we're creating pathways now that are culturally sensitive, rooted in listening and the reduction of harm, because as we move so fast, we often continue to recreate harms that are already untended culturally. So we believe that land transitions can be healing, they can be reparative in the process themselves, and they can be transformations instead of transactions, and of course, transition access to land. In the Center for Ethical Land Transition, the Future of Land Justice, we are seeing patterns of the permanent decommodification of land. So many incredible alternatives to private property are now being created, listened to, and of course, Indigenous folks are leading the way in this because it's a cosmology shift in which we're coming into sacred connection with land and other humans and non-human relations. This requires us to learn and engage with and be part of the story of the land as something that's unfolding as we empower Indigenous, Black, and other cultural communities to have access and ownership. It's an amazing learning happening with what we are calling culturally affirmative title holding. And so I'll talk more about that. The multiracial teams working in solidarity, and folks with accumulated wealth and resources are participating in material and relational repair so that the land can be rematriated and repaired with original peoples. Facilitation is provided by increasingly trained folks with cultural sensitivity and anti-racism training. So at the Center for Ethical Land Transition, we like to reframe the relationships in the languages, continually using new and emergent language that helps us understand what's actually happening. So instead of the land being property, the land is at center. The land is all of our home, all of our place of belonging. The land is the circle within which we all sit, and the land is what is bringing us together. We use the words title holders instead of sellers or owners, because in that legal fiction, that's what that person or organization is doing. They're holding title. The folks in that would be the buyers, those folks are in the seat of reunion or rematriation. And this is not a transaction. This is actually maybe not just a transition, it's a transformation, because everybody is transforming their relationship to land. The title holders are, even if you're selling at a discount, there is a relinquishment of entitlement. And that's not just the title of the land. There's a relinquishment of entitlement that requires an examination of the legacy of our participation in colonialism. So it's an entitlement of perspective also, and an entitlement of process. And so, so we're looking and supporting at what kind of support do title holders need to go through that relinquishment as a way of coming into right relationship with land. In the seat of reunion, those folks are gaining ground, literally with land, reuniting with land, but also gaining ground in the restoration of kinship and culture and their worldview being listened to and given space. The agent and or attorney and or facilitator we are roles that are helping people come into right relationship with the land, each other, and also history. So we're holding a context much larger than just any one land transition. With the Center for Ethical Land Transition, we are guided by a compass to just continually orient us. And so our North Star is coming into right relationship with land, all of us, every single one of us. And current title holders, and this isn't everybody, and we're not saying everybody has to give up their land or sell their land or anything like that. But for the folks we're working with in land transitions, we're supporting even the title holders in their stewardship journey through transition, coming into right relationship with land, even as they're letting go. In the East, where the sun and the moon and the stars and everything rises as the world turns, we're also supporting folks in reunion. Reunion with land for Native, Black, and communities of culture and color, that we're supporting what that pathway takes for those folks to come into relationship, and not that many of them have lost relationship with land, but to actually come into that stewardship, and how do they want to hold title, how it works for them in on their journey of reunion. In the South, we support the work of facilitators and agents and provide transition support and training for folks playing that facilitative role. And in the center of our compass is that center fire, that the stories and the learnings that bring us together in this work, because this is multi-generational work. It's going to take time. So we need to be fed by the warmth of the center fire as we learn together and share our stories. There are many different forms of land transfer, and so this is by no means an exhaustive list, and I'm going to name a few. You can certainly bequeath land to tribes or community organizations in one's trust or will. You can transfer title without cost or at a discount, or even at the appraised or market value. And one of the things that you can do is to take your time in doing that. So even if there is a need for financial payment, that can still happen with a lot of healing and participation with fundraising, and support and time. So in an off-market process of making an offer of land to a community group or tribe, this is a big topic, and this does need good facilitative support, ideally from folks who are trained in cultural sensitivity and anti-racism, because it's so easy to just go down a path, to say things, to do things that we did not realize were actually causing unintended harm. And so this is, we do a lot of this work in the Center for Ethical Land Transition. And so in the last item here is that sometimes you can't do any one of these, even though you might want to, for various factors that may have to do with your organization or family situation. But sometimes, as I know some folks on this call have done, been able to sell the land in that public context and have an opportunity to redistribute the wealth that comes from that sale. So this photo happened at Heron Shadow, which is a really beautiful native land project that is supported and held by the Cultural Conservancy. And this was a land back gathering that we had just this past fall. And this is Sarah and Redbird, both of the Cultural Conservancy, and myself sitting in a circle. And my I was the support that I get in telling these stories. One of my work partners said, just slow down on this slide and just let this slide bring you into your own story about coming into cultural sensitivity. So this is a really good one for me, because on this, in organizing this event, this was just last year, and even doing this work and working with unrecognized tribes for years, I am, oh, thank you so much. I see that, Sophie. I'm on my own journey of healing from white supremacy, and the kind of just chaos that it can actually happen for us when we don't necessarily know when it's right for us to step forward, when it's right for us to step back, when it's right for us to wait to be invited. And it would be really cool if it was a formula. It would be really great if it was just something that we actually, I'm going to stop sharing, because I'm just talking here. And just so you can see my face and my own journey with that. I do have a final slide that maybe, Sophie, you can help me share, that's got how to be in touch with us. But I just wanted to share that, you know, it would be really convenient, right? If this work was a checkbox formula, but that's exactly what it's not. And so it brings us into, you know, the hard work. And you know, I feel so blessed because I get to keep showing up to these land transitions. And so even if I kind of, like, if I do something or I say something and then I go home and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I said that. And believe me, that happens to me, you know, for sure. I have the really blessed opportunity of coming right back at it and not necessarily needing to take up a bunch of that, my collaborators' time or my clients' time, making sure that, you know, they can make me feel better about how I messed up. I'm really blessed to be able to come right back at it and go, okay, so I'm showing up for this land transition. And so in so many ways, I feel like actions do speak louder than words. And our willingness to continue to examine our own unexamined entitlement, like as a practice for probably the rest of our lives, that there's unexamined entitlements that that come with the territory of what we've been enculturated into. And so I think that the cultural sensitivity in land transitions is really about like realizing, you know, like continuing to pull the shroud of and blindnesses of white supremacy out of our eyes and realize that there are cosmologies and relationships with land and cultures that are right here that are regarding this very same land. And seeking to be and restore their relationships that were, of course, you know, violently taken. And so, you know, we have lots of teachers out there that give us, you know, Lila June, you know, what if anything can I do is, you know, is a question. And then one of my teachers, Al Frank, is like, it also says, you know, just think about it. Like colonization tore us all apart and divided us. Of course we need help, but not that kind of paternalizing help, but the kind of help that says, I know that you're going to need a way, especially if you're an unrecognized tribe, because you've done your homework and you understand what's happening in your area. You recognize, oh, what's going on with unrecognized tribes? What do you need to create a title holding way that works for you? And I could go on, and I've talked my time, and but I have I just want to see if there's anything else that I want to say. I mean, of course, there's the listening and the moving slowly and the checking one's agenda over and over again, even if we think it's very well intentioned, and asking and asking. And so I'm going to pause right here and give my voice a break. And I'm going to rejoin with I'm going to rejoin with Frank in a little bit. And I'm seeing that Sophie's saying that I could share the last slide when I'm ready. Okay, that sounds good. But why don't we go ahead and move to Frank right now, and I can bring that slide up later. Thank you so much for your listening and allow me to share about my work and with you all.
Well, thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. Barbara, you're staying muted, so I'm just going to go, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Let me organize my screen for a second. Thank you so much, Cassandra. That was really powerful, and a lot of that resonated kind of with my own experience coming at this from a different direction. So let's see. As Barbara said, my name's Frank Lawrence. I'm an attorney. I have worked with exclusively federally recognized Indian tribes basically my whole career. And about 4.5 years ago, I started working with the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe, which is a non-federally recognized tribe. I have lived in Nevada City since 1999, and so it's the tribe in my area. I'm living on their homelands. And I thought what I would do, I could give you a very brief background on the work that I've done. And really, I want to focus on the tribe and its history and how we got to where we are today. And I'll preface it by saying, this is not in any way a complete history of the tribe. These are some significant points in time that have jumped out at me in the time I've been working with the tribe. So I think I'll start kind of with the history, the legal history of the tribe, significant events, just briefly, and then to the work that I've done with the tribe in the last 4.5 years. So an ancestor of the tribe was a signatory to the 1851 Camp Union Treaty, which was signed down towards the Central Valley in what is now Western Nevada County. It was Yuba County at the time. There were 18 treaties signed by the federal government and tribes in California in 1851. And under our Constitution, those treaties have to be ratified by the Senate in order to take effect. And the California congressional delegation lobbied heavily against ratification, and none of those treaties were ever ratified. So people talk about broken treaties, and California and the Nisenan tribe in particular didn't even get to the point of having a treaty that was legally binding. And it was decades, it was probably over half a century before the fact that the treaties were not ratified became public knowledge. They were buried in the vaults of the United States Senate. That treaty would have given a 12 square mile, approximately 12 square mile reservation to the tribe between the Bear and the Yuba Rivers in what is now Western Nevada County. In 1913, President Woodrow Wilson signed an executive order that recognized the tribe and created a 75-acre rancheria on Cement Hill, which is between Nevada City and the Yuba River, if you're familiar with that beautiful river in our area, the Ubaseo. In 1934, Congress passed a law called the Indian Reorganization Act that allowed tribes to conduct an election and organize as a tribal government under that federal statute. Nevada City Rancheria requested a secretarial election, and a federal official from the BIA in Sacramento came up and prepared a voter roll, and an election happened in 1935, and the tribe voted to organize under that federal statute. There were a number of tribal members, adult tribal members, that were not present on the rancheria when that voter roll was created. Tribal members frequently had to leave the rancheria for work, for seasonal work and other work. So there were a lot of adult members that would have been qualified voters in 1935 that were not included on that list. In the 1950s, the federal government took many, if not most, of the children away from tribal members. They were sent involuntarily without their parents' consent to BIA boarding schools. Many of them were placed in non-native foster and adoptive homes. In 1958, Congress passed a statute called the California Rancheria Act. And it was an expression of a federal policy of assimilation. Federal Indian policy over the centuries has swung between a policy of recognizing tribal sovereignty and supporting it at one end, then swinging to a policy of assimilation, where the federal government's view is tribes should be terminated and Indian people should try to assimilate into American society. The 50s was a period of assimilationist policy, and it culminated in the Rancheria Act. Under that act, the tribe's rancheria was sold ultimately in 1964, purportedly on the request of one elderly couple that lived on the rancheria at that time. There was no notice to any of the other tribal members. There was no consent by any of the other tribal members. Despite the fact that we have documents from the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the late 1950s showing the government knew that there were many more adult tribal members living on the Rancheria at that time. The sale of the land has been considered a termination of the tribe. And there was a mention before about, I think Barbara mentioned sort of the difference between federally recognized tribes and unrecognized tribes. Federal recognition is a political relationship between the United States and a tribal government. And with it comes all of the benefits of all of the federal programs that relate to Indians and Indian tribes. So there's an entire title of the United States Code, Title 25 of the US Code, that deals with, that's titled Indians. All of that, all the federal programs for housing, education, healthcare, environmental, self-governance, on and on and on and on, only apply to federally recognized tribes. So unrecognized tribes that Cassandra mentioned working with have no access to any of those programs or benefits. So it's a pretty big deal. In 1979, California Indian Legal Services, which is legal aid for Indians and Indian tribes, filed a lawsuit challenging the terminations of many Northern California tribes under the 58 Act. And the Nevada City Rancheria was a named plaintiff in that case. In 1983, the government settled the case and agreed to restore all those tribes to federal recognition. Nevada City Rancheria was omitted from the judgment in that case by clerical error. The lawyers that litigated that case, both for CILS, the tribes, and the federal government, are alive, and we actually have declarations from those lawyers stating they can't explain why Nevada City Rancheria was omitted from that judgment, but it was. In 2009, the tribe adopted a new constitution, its 1935 IRA constitution having been lost to history. In 2010, the tribe hired a law firm in Sacramento to try to amend the judgment in that 1979 litigation to have the tribe added to the list of tribes restored to federal recognition. The government raised the statute of limitations as a defense for the first time. And the case was the effort to amend that judgment and include Nevada City Rancheria was dismissed with prejudice, and the Ninth Circuit affirmed on the statute of limitations grounds. So in 2014, CHIRP was formed as a California public benefit nonprofit corporation. It's a 501c3. Yes, contributions and donations are tax deductible. And CHIRP, really, because the tribe is not federally recognized, it doesn't exist as a legal entity. It's not a cognizable legal entity in our legal system, which is nothing but legal fictions. Cassandra, you were talking about the legal fiction of land. Everything in the law is a fiction, in my view. So CHIRP was formed to give the tribe a legally cognizable entity that could raise money, that could write grant proposals and create programs and so on. And there's since starting around 2010 and then the founding of CHIRP in 2014, the tribe has done a remarkable job of building its visibility in the local community. Okay, so about 2019, I started working with the tribe. We've had weekly meetings that continue to this day to talk about how we might be able to restore the tribe's federal recognition. We began collecting and digitizing and codifying historical documents. There are a lot of documents, 1928 California Indian roll affidavits, birth certificates, death certificates, and so on, marriage records. And we began collecting those documents and preserving them, putting them in the cloud, getting them digitized so that they're safe. And Also in 2019, the Nevada County Historical Society did its own kind of independent research project. And after months and months of study, issued a resolution recognizing the tribe as the original tribe of this area and endorsing its campaign to restore federal recognition. In 2020, we began looking at the tribe's constitution and enrollment criteria and started the process of trying to amend those to bring them into alignment with federal law that pertains to the inheritance of Indian property and the historical records of the tribe. On September 23rd of 2020, the Nevada City Council unanimously passed a resolution recognizing the tribe and supporting its campaign to restore federal recognition. On December 15th of 2020, the Nevada County Board of Supervisors unanimously approved a resolution recognizing the tribe, supporting its campaign to restore federal recognition, and pledging government-to-government cooperation. In 2021, we, working with Professor Brian Daniels of the University of Pennsylvania and the Penn Cultural Heritage Center, and also an affiliate of the Smithsonian Institution, and his graduate students, built a sort of a database and a book of enrollment for the tribe. So we can take every single tribal member enrolled today, and through marriage, birth records, death certificates, and so on, trace them back to that 1935 voter roll that I talked about earlier. And we prepared and the tribe voted to accept amendments to the Constitution to bring its enrollment criteria into line with federal law. It's called the American Indian Probate Reform Act. And that process of amending the Constitution and the enrollment criteria expanded the universe of people eligible to enroll in the tribe. I'll say parenthetically, there are about 144 enrolled members. There are many people that are eligible for enrollment who are enrolled at other tribes, which is very common in Indian country. There are a lot of people that are eligible for enrollment in Nevada City that are enrolled in other tribes that are federally recognized, that carry all those benefits I was mentioning earlier. And so there's, and both federal and tribal law typically prohibit dual enrollment. So there's no incentive for folks to disenroll at a federally recognized tribe to enroll at an unrecognized tribe. And then we also in 2021, we submitted an application to get the tribe listed with the California Native American Heritage Commission. This is a state commission of gubernatorial appointees that implements state law with respect to environmental consultation when there's a project. When you have a project under CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, tribes are entitled to be consulted if the project is in their Aboriginal territory. And the Native American Heritage Commission administers that notice process. Thank you, Sophie. And they have a specific set of criteria for listing, and they are by statute, state law, able to list tribes that are not federally recognized. And Nevada City Rancheria had applied 5 or 6 times over probably 10 years or more and been ignored by the NAHC. We got their attention and we submitted an application in 2021. Roughly 1,500 pages of material that we submitted. 2022, on March 21st, the Native American Heritage Commission issued a letter recognizing the tribe, listing it, which was a big win. And in November of 2022, the Grass Valley City Council, Grass Valley and Nevada City are contiguous cities, unanimously approved a resolution recognizing the tribe and supporting its campaign to restore federal recognition. 2023, we filed an ad hoc administrative petition for federal recognition with the head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. This is not a process authorized under federal law, but for reasons that I will spare you, we decided to do that. And the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, Brian Newland, acknowledged receipt. We asked for meetings to discuss it, and that went on for months and months and months. And we finally got a one-sentence email saying our request to meet and discuss the petition was denied without any reason. Let's see, in the summer of 2023, we began discussions with folks on the board of the John Woolman School property. And in the fall, we negotiated a letter of intent and began negotiating a sale and purchase agreement. In December of 2023, Cassandra was connected with us and with the Woolman board and began a series of meetings kind of individually. And then she facilitated joint meetings that really got us to the point where we were able to conclude a purchase and sale agreement, or I like your language better, Cassandra, but you know what I mean. And that agreement was fully and finally executed January 8th of 2024. So we opened an escrow on January 8th and began the fundraising campaign and the due diligence work that we have in front of us. So that's a rip-roaring, lickety-split kind of overview of legal history for the tribe and the work that I've done with the tribe. And I think I will pause there.
Well, thank you so much, Frank. That has been really helpful and important information. So you've left us right at the point where the agreement has been signed, and now we're in the fundraising stage. So I'd like to invite Cassandra back into the room, and see, and Sophie, if you could highlight both Frank and Cassandra, that's great. Then maybe the two of you could tell us a little bit more about that process and what shifted. Because I have a feeling, although each situation is unique because people come with different needs and different expectations, there might have been something in this that was pretty universal. So maybe you could share a little bit with us.
I'll jump in real quick and say that's exactly right, Barbara. The first conversation that Cassandra and I had was just a one-on-one phone call. And as I described to her, my perspective about the conversations that had transpired, that's exactly what she said. This is not new to me. This is standard operating procedure. I mean, this is the story I hear over and over again.
Yeah. I was invited in when, when Frank said that negotiations had kind of gotten pretty stuck, would you say? And it was a really actually I wanted to just name a couple of personal pieces for me. Not only do I love that area so much and have spent time there, it was like, oh my gosh, opportunity to help, serve this tribe coming together in this place was really motivating to me, but also I have Quaker roots. My first ancestors that I know of that came over through in the 1600s were Quakers, and my mom still has the last name of that ancestor. And I've been so curious to come closer in with Quakers. And so there's a personal piece of it. And then it was also really unique because I wasn't anybody's real estate person. And I wasn't, I was brought in as a process facilitator to help get that negotiation unstuck. And what I found when I got a chance to meet everybody and hear the stories, was that I had, the parts that were all too sort of familiar to me, are some of the things that I talked about in my presentation of just my own journey, where really well-intentioned people had actually made some faux pas that they didn't realize that they had made. But once I shared that with the woman board, they were immediately receptive. They were grateful that I held that mirror to them with grace and compassion. Then they were like, oh my gosh, of course. I'm not sure about going into some of those specifics right now, but they responded with so much equanimity. And then the other thing that I would just say about the process is that because of that separation, and I do not have anything, I know those real estate agents and you, Frank, were working your butt off to try to bring something together, but there's a particular way that contracts repel relationship, even though contract as a root word is a drawing together. It's like meaning to draw us together. Sometimes those legal agreements can really give off the wrong vibe. They're not actually what was meant to be communicated. And so once I listened to everybody, I was like, oh my gosh, you guys there's some pieces here that have been lost in translation. And once I was, able to reflect that too, and I started to introduce other language, like not sides, but sides of the circle. You guys are all wanting to be in the same circle together. So let's just put you in the same circle. And so there were pieces around language that people grabbed a hold on to, and then just the very human experience of hearing from each other, and was very lubricating to some of that stuckness, and hearing about everyone's love of the land, everyone's relationship with that place. It was really amazing, actually, to go from feeling all of those, unfortunately, that kind of textbook things pitfalls that we're all getting stuck in these days, and then to in a short period of time actually help and everybody working together and realizing how much they actually really were on the same page and wanted to be on the same page and shared even things that seemed like they were in between each other were actually shared challenges, not something that could divide them, but actually something that they could come together on.
Yeah, that was my experience as well, that the conventional way real estate deals get negotiated is through an agent. The parties don't talk to each other. The parties don't meet each other. That scares realtors.
Mm-hmm.
Really, right? I think the role that lawyers play and that litigation plays in our society has led the California Association of Realtors standard form purchase and sale agreements for real estate to become longer and longer and longer, because every time there's a lawsuit against a realtor, the lawyers for the California Association of Realtors adds a new paragraph or a new clause or a new page or a new addendum to their form, and it just gets longer and longer and longer, and it's legalese, it's boilerplate, and it's protection, it's legal protection is how they view it. And I think the parties talking to each other, it scares realtors because they're afraid people are going to say something that then doesn't show up in a written disclosure, or that there's some lack of consistency between what somebody said verbally and what appears in writing, and that so yeah, that was it. We absolutely, just speaking for me personally, my sense was that we were just about at a standstill in our negotiations. We had offer and counter offer and offer and counter offer, and maybe another offer and another counter offer. And the Woolman board is subject to its own set of pressures and concerns that the tribe knew nothing about. And I think the tribe and Chirp were also subject to pressures and concerns that the Woolman board knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And I think Cassandra's you're 100% right that centering the land and everybody's relationship with the land and helped, I think, everybody come to see that we're all on the same side here. We're all in the same circle. And you're using that metaphor and that language, I think was both helpful to people and also helped reframe it in a way. But yeah, I heard from tribal people, you know, we've been out there for celebrations to the land in the past before any of this transaction or transition of the land even was a dream in anyone's eye. And it felt like our home. You know, tribal elders said this feels like home to us. And everybody has that, feels that connection to the land. So it was, you know, you were absolutely essential, and you're, I think, meeting with the tribe first, individually, and meeting with the Woolman board individually, and then facilitating meetings together. I think we had 2 or 3 maybe meetings with the Woolman board and tribal representatives and so on, after some one-on-one conversations that you had first to kind of get background and perspective. So, you know, and it happened quickly.
Yeah.
It happened quickly. I looked at my calendar. I think the first time you and I spoke, I think, was December the 8th.
Oh,
And in 2 or 3 weeks, we had gone from stuck to pretty much having a deal together that everybody could live with.
mhm,
So it was pretty quick.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was really amazing because what I saw were two groups that actually really wanted this to happen. But those contracts had given, and all the back and forth had actually given some other kinds of signals. And so, yeah. Thanks for breaking it down in the way that you did, Frank. And I think what I would just say in reflection was that there was a need for more simplicity, actually, a need to go back to the original intent, and then to give space for more of a simple agreement to come together to like reset, so that then the actual unfolding of the escrow could happen, and not try to figure everything out.
Phone, they only show her.
I'm not muted.
Somebody's, oh yeah.
Here we go. Well,
Barbara,
let's
you're-
go into some questions and answers then. And a little sharing over here in the home front. Let's ask, so this was a relatively quick situation, and moving from stuck to unstuck, but the groups had been working towards this for a little while. In your experience, what sort of time do land transitions often take?
Oh, well, that's a interesting question, because
The range, maybe.
from when people start talking to each other, or
Or when they start really getting committed to, we're going to really try to do something.
yeah. Well, they always take longer than everybody wants going into it, because a lot of people going into land transitions, maybe the only kind of real estate like ish thing that they've done may have been like something more simple, like a private or family buying a house or selling a house. And so there's this idea that like, oh, we're gonna have like a 30-day escrow, you know, but no, most of the land transitions that I work on are complex. They're generally larger acreage. There's generally a lot of history to learn about the place. There's a lot of structures. There's a lot of invisible structures underneath the ground that you need to, you know, learn about. There's a lot on a physical level to be learned about for the folks coming into stewardship, and sometimes even for the folks who are, quote, selling or relinquishing the title, because you know, in this case, you're working with a board of directors who may not know the whole history, and they're learning the history while this event called a land transition is about to you know, be undertaken. And the real estate industry gives you this idea that like, oh, and like list it and it's super hot real estate, you know, California real estate, and you get a bunch of offers and you can sell and it can happen really fast. Well, when you're doing something that's actually relationship centric and land centric, you need to factor in a lot more time. And especially if you also want it to help repair those relationships, if you want to give time for people to learn about each other, and sort some things out about like maybe even continued relationships. So you want to give more time for that. So it's hard for me to estimate, but I want to say like, you know, and a lot of boards or organizations that are like, they're thinking about selling something for years before they actually get to, like, they're seeing like that coming on the horizon. So I'm not factoring that in. I'm going to factor in the, like, you want to do something and you might want to do it locally, like give at least 6 months to build, to like sort out relationships, talk to each other, see what's possible, and then anticipate if it's a really complex property that you're going to need at least 3 to 6 months for the actual transition.
Thank
If you have
you.
more time, then give more time.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of questions about the that have to do with giving land back without without money changing hands. One is, what are some of the ethical and maybe creative ways that an organization that already has debt, how can they approach giving the land, returning the land in such a way as to eliminate the monetary cost and the labor that is otherwise being passed through to the indigenous communities?
Yeah. I would say that question of time and participation also in fundraising, like see the fundraising activity as also one that you're willing to participate in. If you can't just gift the land, then join on the team of locating the financial resources that will allow that transition to happen. Frank, do you have other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, and that's our situation, right? That you know, the Woolman Center has received a lot of financial support from the Quaker community over the years and decades, and there is debt on the property, and the board understandably, you know, feels, I think, I shouldn't speak for the board, but my sense is feels a legal and an ethical duty to try to repay that debt that is still out there. You know, I will say that the board has been, my sense has been that they're doing just what you said, Cassandra. They want this to happen. They want to help in any way they can, to I think two of the board members at Woolman are local to this community, and so I see them out and about more and have more communication with them. And they're both, very, very supportive and eager to do what they can, I think, to try to help. But the financial pressures are very real, and our very tight time frame for this transition is a direct function of that, that the financial pressure. And my understanding is that that Woolman has let go of all of its employees, save for one interim executive director, and to try to get costs down. But there's insurance, there's property taxes, there's carrying costs, and there's outstanding debt. And so our time pressure here is very much connected to that. So yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
sadly, I've seen it happen a number of times that, that maybe it's because of attachment to the place and like not wanting to actually face that there's going to be a sale. That there can be a waiting until the financial pressure then starts to create a time pressure. And so that's a really common pattern, unfortunately. And so I think one of the answers to that question is also if there is a way for, if you do need financial compensation to pay off debts, understandable. But if at all possible, to give as much time as you can so that it doesn't create something that that stresses everybody out. And yeah.
So we have a couple more questions that I'd like to get to before we move on to the next piece. One was, is there a possibility of tax deduction for the title holder when they donate the land or transfer it for below market value? Do you know anything about that tax deduction possibility?
In our transaction, the entity relinquishing title is already a tax exempt entity, so the tax deduction doesn't help a whole lot for them.
Doesn't apply.
For Woolman specifically. But yeah, and I'm not a tax lawyer, so I'd be reluctant to give advice about that as to if the landowner is a taxable entity. I don't, Cassandra, you probably know about that.
Yeah, and I'm also not a tax attorney, so but there, there's of course like the it depends answer as well, because there's would need to be an appraisal of market value. There would need to be a sale at below that market value. And then it would depend on other factors relative to what that title holder had into the land and the project. So I think it but I do know that tax shelter in transitioning title of land into a nonprofit can be that can be something that happens. I've heard quite a bit about that. So so I know that it can be it can play out that way for private title holders.
Okay.
I guess I was concerned about like upholding a monetary transaction as like a model of an ethical land transition. To me, it feels like it might be ethically questionable to predicate land return on Indigenous folks paying off all the debts and expenses of essentially a colonizer organization, especially in a case of people who have lost federal recognition and are even more economically disadvantaged, whereas the title holders currently are relatively privileged. So I guess my question is, it's not necessarily directly about this moment. I don't know if there's anything we can do with that, but just a kind of rhetorical question of like, is it always more important to pay off debt than to make sure that land is returned to the right people?
Fantastic question. And I definitely see ethical land transitions, certainly as we support them, as an imperfect learning journey that excuse me, that we're on. I participate in supporting like way more outrageous buybacks, honestly, when they're what is needed for the tribe or you know, the group. So it's paying ransom for the land is unfortunately a really strong strategy right now. And so it may, I feel like you know, ethics are one of the things that, you know, we could get really like, you know, in a sense rigid about, but I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And we're working with a situation with very real humans that feel very accountable as a board to real, you know, financial relationships that they've made. So I'm not one to say, oh, you shouldn't, you know, honor those things. But I think it's a really important question you ask, and we should keep asking it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a great question. If you stood up and asked that question at a tribal meeting, you would get a standing ovation. And like Cassandra said, we have real people who have real obligations as members of a board. They have legal duties and they feel pressures, and you know, so you know, we're in the situation that we're in, and we're doing the best we can with what we've got, is sort of how I view it. And in a perfect world, I think you're, you know, the answer that you've implied to your question would be, of course, it should be a donation of the land, and then, you know, the Woolman board should raise the money to pay off the debt they incurred. That would be the most ethical way of doing it, but that's not my decision to make. So there we are.
Well, and it's one of these situations that people didn't spend a long time planning and thinking about how are we going to do this, and letting it evolve into the kind of longer process that Cassandra mentioned in her part of the presentation. So I think one of the takeaways is for the rest of us, if we are going to will or put land in trust, or if we're going to, if our, God forbid, our meetings fail and we have land that needs to be transferred in some way, that we take time to think about that ahead of time and not get kind of caught in the last moment of making decisions that are under such time pressure.
Yeah.
And Carl Anderson, thank you both so much. I'm going to jump the agenda a little bit and let everybody know that we have a resource sheet that we're going to give you a link to. And so we've had some questions that are a little bit more specific to Woolman's situation, and there is going to be a link to the Woolman website on the resource sheet. There are also a list of different tribes and their land that they've been able to acquire or acquire access to, grouped by land that was that they purchased, land that was ceded to them without cost, land where they might have a co-management arrangement or a stewardship arrangement, and a couple of situations where there were actually private donors. And those have links, and so you can go to the articles about them if you choose and read the story about each one, and it's pretty fascinating. I would like, before we go to the piece that Frank was going to share with us, this has to do with CHIRP's current fundraising situation, which people are also asking about. If we could hear the news that Santa Cruz meeting has for us, if we could have Nancy and Hans pop in right here, and then we'll go to Frank after that. And just before we do all of that, if you did not register and would like me to email you the link to the resource sheet. And if you or if you would like a link to the recording of this session, please pop your email into the chat to either me or Sophie. So right now we'll hear from Nancy and Hans.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, so yesterday, we had a business meeting for, non-Quakers. That's kind of happens every month, and that's how you discuss all the business of the meeting. And people can bring proposals to business meeting, and Nancy and I brought a proposal. And normally you bring a proposal and it takes a month at least of waiting and thinking about it and seasoning before a decision is made. But with the time constraints of this transaction, we thought we'd ask them to please accept this as is, rewrite it a little bit, but get comfortable with it now and pass it. So they did it, which is a miracle in itself. So yesterday, Santa Cruz Friends Meeting passed a minute and approved a donation in support of the land transition at Pullman. And we believe that this is an historic moment for Quakers. It represents an opportunity to participate in a living example of our stewardship testimony and activist legacy. By encouraging friends to donate and specifically to identify themselves as Quakers, along with their meeting affiliation, we are broadcasting our support as a faith community. Our meeting will be inviting meetings across the U.S. to spiritually and financially support this effort. The minute we passed reads as follows.
Santa Cruz Friends Meeting supports a $500 donation from the Donations Fund to the California Heritage Indigenous Research Program, CHIRP, the nonprofit raising funds to purchase the Sierra Friends Center to return the land to the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe. Santa Cruz Friends Meeting also encourages individuals to make donations, quote, on behalf of the Santa Cruz Friends Meeting, close quote. The clerks and Hans and Nancy will contact other meetings and publications with this information.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Santa Cruz Meeting. I forgot to mention that the resource sheet that you will receive also has links to organizations such as Friends Peace Teams Toward Right Relationships and Decolonizing Quakers and various other places that you can go for information. So with that, let's go back to Frank, who is going to share some information from CHIRP. And as some people have been asking, you know, what if the land sale, if the money can't be raised for the remainder of the purchase? Well, this is what we're all here to try to chip in about and also spread the word about. So Frank's going to give us the tools that we might need for that.
Well, first I want, as a UC Santa Cruz alumni and a former editor of City on a Hill Press, I just want to thank the Santa Cruz meeting for getting that done. So Nancy and Hans, thank you very much. Barbara, there are two quick questions about the tribe in the chat that I'd like to just touch on real quick, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. One is the tribe still working towards federal recognition? Is recognition still a possibility? Yes, we're still working towards it, and I believe there's still a possibility. Not easy, but possible. And the second question was, is a land base a prerequisite for federal recognition? Would having a larger land base help the Nisenan Rancheria in this cause? No, it's not a prerequisite. Federal recognition and a federal reservation, Indian land, trust land, all those rancheria, those things all mean the same thing. Pueblo, if you're in New Mexico, they're separate. So there are federally recognized tribes today with no land. There are tribes that have land that are not federally recognized. They're two separate processes, but you cannot have federal Indian land unless you're a federally recognized tribe. Would it help? Potentially. There are different paths to federal recognition. And one of those paths, owning land in your ancestral territory, is not a absolute prerequisite, but it's a factor in a multi-factor analysis that would be helpful. So acquiring this property for the tribe would be helpful in an administrative recognition process, which is one of the avenues that we may be going down. So that's that. And then I will say that the CHIRP board has passed a resolution that any and all funds raised for this project are dedicated to the acquisition of a tribal homeland. So if this transaction, if this rematriation doesn't happen for whatever reason, any money that's donated is going to be expressly reserved for the purpose of acquiring a homeland for the tribe. That was something that folks felt was important. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay. Let me share my screen. I have some slides that I'd like to show you on this project. So let me know if you can see that. Yes, okay. And let me get it so I can move. All right, so these are some tribal leaders, tribal elders on the Tribute Trail, which is a really popular hiking trail in Nevada City along Deer Creek. This is uphill from the Friends Center. This slide just talks about kind of the project and the tribe and its logo, and CHIRP and its logo, and some contact information. Some information about the tribe. And some pictures, some tribal folks out on the land. And I think that's the office and classroom on the right. I've got my perspective. There's a slide about the tribe's loss of land. You know, the gold rush, as we all know, was absolutely devastating. We are in the heart of the gold rush. You know, placer mining was invented in Nevada County, where they used water cannons to wash away the hillsides to try to expose gold more quickly. So reference to the treaties that I talked about earlier that were never signed. And, oh, sorry about that. The executive order that I mentioned, the termination, and the opening of the escrow. There are cultural resources on this land. The land was the site of a historic Nisenan village. The tribe has a lot of historical information about that village. So it really is a rematriation of an actual tribal homeland for the tribe. There are cultural resources on the land. And as I mentioned before, it's a place that tribal elders in particular feel a strong connection to. This slide is just about CHIRP, established in 2014. It's produced a lot of community events and really raised the tribe's visibility in the collective consciousness of the community. Eve Berry, who I think was on, I saw earlier, has done incredible work with CHIRP in grant writing and developing funding for programs in terms of helping tribal youth and just a whole range of programs that have been grant funded. The tribe has the Ubaseo Gallery in downtown Nevada City, which if you ever find yourself in Nevada City, you should seek it out. It's right on Broad Street, the main drag in downtown Nevada City. It's a phenomenal space for art, and the tribe and Chirp have worked hard at visibility through art as a means of raising consciousness around the fact that they're still here. So Ulicha, I think is the name of the historical village. And I need to keep my finger off the scroll wheel. We've opened an escrow. We have until April 4th to raise the money. There's been a tremendous response in this community here locally. The fundraising campaign, I think, is a week old tonight. And the last I checked, there were something like 790 individual donations, and we were, I think, over $115,000. In terms of the vision, folks ask frequently, what's the tribe going to do on the land? I think, an honest answer is take a deep breath and look around and sit for a while. But there is housing already on the land. There are a number of single family homes and homes that would lend themselves to multifamily residence. And the tribal members, there's a tremendous need for housing. I was really moved in doing a walkthrough of the structures on the property. Once we had an escrow opened, a tribal member commented, we were in the tool shed at Woolman. This is one of these workshop tool shed structures where you can see daylight between the wall at the top of the wall and the roof line. You can see daylight out, no insulation. I can't remember if the floor is dirt or not, but it's a shop. And a tribal member commented that this building would be an improvement in housing, the quality of housing stock for tribal members, which was stunning to me. I knew it was true, but I didn't, but somehow being in the space and hearing that comment. Anyway, the vision would include some housing for some tribal elders. Obviously not a ton of housing, but indigenous food, medicinal plants, gardens. There is a tenant farmer on the land currently with an organic farm, and so the tribe is excited about the possibility of collaborating with the farmer on those kinds of efforts. Just a community center for the tribe to gather, to share meals, to have events. Youth programs are an important part of Chirp's efforts and the tribe's interest, as are wellness issues, arts and crafts kinds of issues. Having ceremonial spaces would be incredible for the tribe. The dream of having a roundhouse in which to conduct ceremonies is something that would be meaningful beyond words, I think, for tribal members. There's excitement and interest in the idea of a cultural interpretive center program, something that could invite people in and help them learn about the history, learn about the land, and learn about the tribe. Obviously, there's opportunities for performances. There is a commercial kitchen. Woolman has generated some revenue from the farm. There's a organic composting business on the land with a tenant. And there have been residential leases that have generated some revenue, so that there's some potential there, although the land is zoned agricultural, and all of Woolman's activities have been under a conditional use permit from the county. But there is a commercial kitchen and a large dining hall. There's a classroom space. Obviously, there's been a lot of education out there over decades, and there would be a lot of overlap in the focus of that in terms of environmental education with the tribe, adding the historical and cultural piece to it. Anyway, I think that's all kind of self-evident. We have until early April to raise the money. The fundraising goal overall is 2.4 million, which includes the purchase price, government required improvements, and an operating endowment. And the phase 1 funding target is $1.5 million by April 4th. So we've made a good start, but we have a long ways to go in a relatively short amount of time. So what you can do, you can there are links. I think I don't have my chat open, so I think Sophie maybe put those in the chat. If not, we can do that. There is a dedicated web page on CHIRP's website to this with more information. This picture is Shelley Covert in the red. Shelley is a tribal member. She's on the tribal council, and she is the executive director of CHIRP. I should say that CHIRP is a tribally directed nonprofit. It is a California public benefit nonprofit corporation. It has 501c3 status under IRS tax code. But it's tribally directed. So Shelley is the executive director of CHIRP, as well as being an elected member of the tribal council and enrolled tribal member. This is her mother, Virginia Covert, Ginny Covert. She's vice chair of the tribe, and also is on the board of directors of CHIRP. Let's see, there's a QR code you can scan with a Nissan basket in the middle. And there's a GoFundMe campaign. There's that link, and I think again that has hopefully been popped into the chat, and you can link to it from CHIRP's website, which is just chirp.org. I will say on the GoFundMe, people have asked me about, doesn't the tribe lose some percentage to GoFundMe? Because CHIRP is a nonprofit, GoFundMe does not charge a fee. They assume that when you make a donation, you'll give them a tip, but you can adjust the amount of that tip down to 0 if you want to on the GoFundMe page. So that's a question that's come up a lot. And you can also just mail a check to CHIRP. If you put in the subject line Homeland Return, then it will go into that dedicated account that I was talking about. So I think that's it for for that little slideshow. And
Well, thank you so much, both of you again, Frank and Cassandra. It's been really a delight to have you here and to put our Woman to CHIRP land transition into some broader context. Sophie has put all these links in the chat, and she's putting them in again now for people to grab as they leave. Also, I think you can save the chat. If you'd like to have things sent to you directly, put your email in the chat and we can do that. The one last question that I would like to ask Nancy and Hans that just came in was, how does Santa Cruz Meeting plan to disseminate their information?
So we've been talking about that, and we're going to draft a letter that contains some of the information in the proposal that we took to our meeting, as well as the information that we've just learned tonight from the slideshow and from the discussion. And we plan to go online and find emails for Quaker meetings across the United States.
And publications.
And publications, yeah.
And larger Quaker groups. So we'll draft a powerful letter.
Thank you. And of course, the Indigenous Concerns Subcommittee is very glad to hear about this news. And we would love to hear from any other Quaker meetings in our Pacific Yearly meeting that are writing minutes or making donations or in some way becoming allies to Indigenous
Mm.
groups. So I'd like to just say good night to everybody, and we'll see about the PowerPoints. We'll include those in the information we send out if that is possible. So thank you all very much for being here, and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.